All right. So we are back with the second half of our show. I have Mr. Marvin Harris on the line now, and we are about to talk about if cheating is the mark of the end of the relationship. So unmute your mic over there, Mr. Marvin Harris, and let's get this show going on.
Okay. Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How you doing today?
I'm doing okay. A little bit of the technical difficulties, but we got through it.
Yes, we did. I just, let our listeners enjoy a little music while we was waiting on you to get it together.
And you play great music.
Yes, and there's great music. Yay! A little bit of rap ain't never hurt nobody, right?
That's right. That's right.
So you had a very interesting topic today, and that is, what's your topic today?
We're going to talk about if cheating should mark the end of a relationship.
Okay. So,
yeah, most people would say yes, absolutely. You cheat, it's over. That's what most people would say. And I think a lot of people say that at the beginning of relationships, where they kind of like lay down the laws, things that they're going to tolerate and what they're not going to tolerate. And one of those things they don't tolerate is cheating. That's the end of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right.
I have a little different viewpoint, but again, I'd never been cheated on till this last relationship, and it wasn't even the cheating that got me. It was more so the lying, because lying is a no-no. That's a no-no. You've been on my page long enough, so I don't believe that we're naturally monogamous. So, and then I have some other different thoughts on some stuff, the lifestyles and different things like that. So I don't necessarily believe that someone having a sexual encounter with someone else is the end of a relationship, because sex is sex. I do believe that the lying and deception and betrayal part is what's most important.
Yeah. So if you are one that has the belief system that you have, or if you are one that just have like the, traditional sort of Christian-based belief system when it comes to relationships and marriage, I think what we have to say today would be helpful for both. All right.
Okay.
So I let's start by just kind of like talking about cheating in and of itself. Much like you just said, when people talk about cheating, we're talking about.
You need to get closer to your phone or something, because you are dropping way out.
Okay, right.
Are you in the shower?
Oh.
Because that's what it sounds like in the shower.
Okay. Hold on a minute. How about now?
Nope. Now you were far, far away.
Very far away. How about now?
Nope.
And now?
Now you're good.
Okay. All right. So let's just start off by talking about cheating in and of itself. Most of us define cheating the way you just defined it, by having a sexual encounter with someone outside of the relationship that you're in. All right. But there are other ways that people can cheat too. All right. You have any idea what I might be referring to?
Emotional cheating.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's bad. Now that's bad, period.
And when you talk about emotional cheating, what comes to mind for you?
When the two people actually form an emotional connection, they care about each other. So your guy or your woman might be helping with bills, or interacting with the kids, or giving them rides and stuff like that. The interactions that are actually non-sexual, that show that you care about the well-being of another person, that's a problem.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So when we talk about cheating here, I don't think it is mentioned enough when we have these conversations about cheating, that emotional cheating is devastating and impactful. Okay.
And those are also the cheating the options that can lead to your mate leaving if they become emotionally invested. Sex ain't really gonna make nobody leave, because sex is sex. But the emotional connection, yeah, that's trouble.
Yes, absolutely. So we have to begin the process of taking a look at cheating from the angle by which it truly impacts all of us, and that is the emotional side of it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So just from that definition alone, when we ask the question, does cheating or does having sex with someone else put you in a position where you have to end the relationship, that should cause us to question at this point. Because what really damages relationships is disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
And the disconnect can lead to sexual interactions with other people, emotional sharing with other people. When the disconnect is there, that's where all the floodgates fly wide open. So one of the things that I like to tell people when they come into my office eventually, and I say eventually because when they come into the office and one of them has been cheated on, there's always like this one-sided sort of interaction where the one that was a cheater is the worst person in the world. The one that's been cheated on is in so much pain. And we got to get both of them to a space where they can actually communicate about it without the one that's been cheated on feeling like they're a victim, and the one that did the cheating not feeling like they're, entirely at fault. So when we get to that point, we can have a conversation about the nature of their relationship, because that's where the problem lies in most cases. Now, we're not talking about, you've been in a relationship for a short period of time, you all still developing connections and stuff like that, and then all of a sudden, one or the other cheats on the other person. We're not talking about situations like that. We're not talking about situations where people who never had any good intentions toward the person and was always cheating from the very beginning of the relationship. We're not talking about situations like that. We are talking about people that have been in a relationship and have created emotional ties, and then all of a sudden someone has cheated. All right. And in those situations, something happened during the course of the relationship that created an atmosphere where cheating could actually take place. So one of the things, I wrote down about 5 points here.
Okay.
And these are things that we must practice within the context of a relationship for the purpose of maintenance, and also for the purpose of guarding the relationship.
Okay.
All right. Okay. All right. So number one, we should routinely engage in check-ins to take the temperature of the relationship and to determine if there are areas that need to be improved.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes. So when you're in a relationship, there should be moments where you sit down and you talk with your partner and you just kind of like ask them, so how you feeling about our relationship? How are you honestly feeling? And then they just kind of like give you like a little quick answer. Then you need to hold their hand, look them in their eye and say, hey, this is check-in time. We need to talk about this.
So let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Because, I do that periodically.
I love it too.
So, we are looking at the outward behavior, which is often a symptom of the inward issues that's going on. So are we saying that, and I guess to some degree that could be true, that are we saying that the condition of the relationship is what leads to cheating, or are we open to the fact that the person who cheats has some issues within themselves?
So when I say, okay, so that's an excellent question, first of all. And let me let me first answer by saying yes to your question. All right. And let me clarify it. So when we have these conversations or when we do these self-reflections on the relationship, it should not only be about the relationship, but it also should be about you as an individual. All right. Because whatever's going on with you individually is going to impact the relationship. Because you all, are together at this point. And we're going to get to that particular point in just a second, but you are absolutely right. So when we talk about relationships, we have to talk about it from the angle of both of you, but we also got to talk about it from the angle of the individual too.
Okay.
Yep. So yes, so we engage in check-ins to take the temperature of the relationship and to determine areas of improvement. All right. And it's within that dialogue that you do, you have the conversations about the relationship. You have conversations about yourselves individually, what's going on, maybe at work, what's going on within the area of intimacy in your relationship. If you feel like, you all are not having enough conversations, all that kind of stuff should occur periodically. Okay. Number 2, you should brush up on your communication skills. All right. So 1 and 2 are tied together. So when you're in a relationship, you got to be able to communicate effectively within the context of the relationship. The last time we talked a lot about communication. And we talked about communication from the standpoint of when there's difficult things to say, how to talk about those things. But in order to be in a relationship, and as I've stated a few times, the number one reason why people break up is not cheating, it's not money, it's communication.
Okay.
So, so if there's a problem from a communication standpoint, it creates a loophole for other things to make its way in.
So my thoughts, and tell me if I'm off. I am a great communicator. Okay. I'm an effective communicator. However, some people are not great listeners, nor do they listen to understand, they listen to respond. And it's as if they want to misunderstand you just so that they can stick to whatever their point is. So when we say effective communication, I'm always a little thrown off because no matter how much one party might communicate effectively and all of that stuff, what if your partner is just not listening?
Yeah, good question. You're in a relationship, if I'm hearing you correctly. You give an example of being in a relationship and you are an effective communicator, but your partner is not an effective communicator. All right.
Listener. They're not a good listener.
They're not a good listener.
Because listening is part of communicating.
Yes, absolutely right about that. Absolutely right. So in those cases, when you find yourself in a situation where the person is not a good listener, there's a couple of things. All right. Obviously, when in situations like that, I'm always going to encourage people to go see a therapist, because if there is a problem listening in the relationship, as you stated, it's going to be a problem when it comes to talking. All right. You're not going to feel understood, and it's going to create distance in the relationship. So I really encourage people to sit down and talk with a therapist if you're really committed to the relationship. Now, within the context of the dialogue, some things that you can practice would be to actually say to the person, I don't feel like I'm being heard right now. And then you all agree to this exercise where you repeat what the other person is saying. All right. So for example, if I say to you, Xavier, that I'm feeling annoyed right now because of something that you said earlier. All right. And then your response isn't,
in the ballpark of what I just said, what I should say to you is that, hey, can you repeat back to me what I just said?
All now, right. See, that works from man to woman sometimes. I mean, we have some very aggressive women as well, but that doesn't work with a man. If I'm in a relationship with a dominant man, which is what I actually like, and I tell him, well, I don't feel like I'm being heard. I need you to repeat back to me what I just said. He gonna look at me and roll his eyes and walk away.
Yeah, Xavier, you're right about that. There is potential for that. There is potential for that. There really is. You're absolutely right about that. So, but I think what's most important in situations like this is not necessarily the initial response of people. Somehow we got to get across to people that it's really important that both of us are heard. It's really important because if I hear what you're saying and I'm able to meet your needs, but you don't hear what I'm saying, how are you meeting my needs?
Right.
How are you doing that? So, so it leads to a number of many different questions. And I do understand, the whole and this makes it a lot more interesting because I understand the whole being with men that are more dominant, but my thoughts when it comes to this is that there is a level of vulnerability that is required in a relationship where you have to put your dominant or your, very strong-willed personality aside to actually be able to humble yourself and hear what your partner is having to say. Because if you don't, you are taking the risk of creating separation between you all, and the relationship will become disconnected, and then everything that we started this conversation off about comes into play at that point. So
and as a woman, that's when you kind of risk. That's when I feel like we risk him actually going to another chick because he's being nagged at home because we want him to repeat what we just said. So now he's being nagged.
Yeah. And you see, that's another one of those things that's been passed down for generations, for years, using language like that to control women and to dominate them. All right. That language, I'm going to say this out loud and I'll say it over and over again. That is controlling and dominating language. That when you're in a relationship, you have to communicate. And as you stated, in order to effectively communicate in a relationship, you gotta be able to hear what the other person is saying. So you cannot say to someone that you're nagging me when you don't hear what they have to say. You can't say that. Like, your goal at that point, if the person that you love and that you have been in a committed relationship with and have emotionally attached to is telling you that I feel like you're not hearing me, you need to take a deep breath and hear what that person has to say, whether you agree with it or not. So that's why it starts with the very simple process of being able to repeat what the other person has to say. Because if you can't, if you don't even hear what they're saying because you're so busy trying to get your point across or trying to continue to be dominant, that relationship is entering into a slippery slope. And I don't care how strong that relationship is. If you stop listening to your partner, you will watch it gradually go downhill, just like water coming down a building, eventually going to tear away at the foundation. So really important that we do that. Excellent question, though. Next point. You have to manage daily stress so it will not undermine your relationship. So how many of us every day have something going on, be it at work, with friends, with family, with loved ones, driving down the street? There's always something that's going on in your life, all right, that at some point or another, if we're not careful, can enter into your personal relationship and undermine just how good it is. Can you relate to what I'm saying?
The outside stress undermining the stuff going on in your relationship.
Yep.
Yeah, I could definitely relate to that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, people on a daily basis experience all kind of things. Sometimes you working at a job and your coworker is slacking and not doing their part. That irritates you. Sometimes your boss irritates you. Sometimes family members,
I was just
they
about to
they
say,
just get on your
sometimes
nerves.
people are so involved in their kids, adult kids' lives, until that can interfere with the relationship.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So there's so many dynamics about our existence that when we try to be in a relationship with someone, we really have to be on top of that stuff. And in the moments when you're not on top of it, you just simply have to come home and say, I had a really bad day. This got on my nerves. That. You have to allow yourself to talk about these things. All right. But when you hold things in, they have a way of working their way out in other ways, and it damages the very healthy relationships that you have in your life. So to be able to manage daily stress is essential when it comes to being able to provide the maintenance that's needed within the context of a relationship. So that was number 3.
Okay.
So number 1 again is we engage in check-ins to take the temperature of the relationship and to address areas that need to be improved. And this also, as you stated before, includes what's going on with us individually.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, we brush up on our communication skills. All right. You gotta be an effective communicator when you're in a relationship.
So
Now,
we have a comment in the chat, and someone said that the man only listens to the woman he cares about.
hey, so and that goes both ways. But to her point, absolutely correct. When people care about one another, there is a tendency to want to hear what the person has to say.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's
So
hard
if
to
your
argue with
mate
that.
is not listening to you, you can assume that person may not actually care that much about you anymore,
or don't care about what you have to say. So you do have to take things like that under consideration. But most of the time, and again, this is coming from quite a bit of time of doing this work. People reach these like areas in their relationship where they get stuck, and they don't know how they got there. But I could tell you firsthand, most of the time it occurred over a long period of time, and it gets to the point where it seems like the person just simply doesn't care, when that's not true. They care. They just have not tapped into a caring exchange in a very long time between one another.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't practice these things fairly consistently, just like anything else, you go out and you buy a car, nice car, the car of your dreams. What do you think is going to happen to that car if you don't take it in for maintenance?
Mm-hmm. It's gonna break all the way down.
Yeah, you're gonna have all kind of problems with that car. Relationships are the same way. They are so good, but they deserve. They have to have maintenance, and you got to be very present when it comes to communication. And that's the other thing I wanted to say about that, and I'm going to give you the other 2 in just a second. The thing about communication is that you don't have to be the best communicator. All right. You just have to stay present. All right. And give you and the other person a chance to work it out.
And you know what? It's interesting that you said that, because one of the things that I've noticed about myself in, previous relationships, because except for these last 2, well, not the last 2, because one was in the middle. I've had 2 relationships that the other person ended, but the rest of my relationships, and I've had 7, I ended, except for my husband who died. Anyway, and one of the things I noticed about myself, if if I'm expressing something to you that needs to change in order for me to be happier in this relationship, I'm only going to say it 2 or 3 times. And after those times, if I feel like I keep repeating myself, that like bothers me. If I have to keep repeating the same thing, I feel like you're not listening to me. And then, like you said, then I feel like you don't care. And I will start to emotionally disconnect. And then before you know it, I'm walking out and you're like, but I thought no, you didn't think we were working on anything. You knew I was talking, but you also knew you weren't doing anything. And I kept repeating myself. And so I don't want to do that. So I'm done.
Yes, absolutely. And, and herein lies, what we've talked about before, in that anytime there's a situation where someone is trying their best to get a point across to someone and the other person is not hearing it, I'm willing to bet you most of the time the culprit is ego. Ego has made its way into the interaction and is not allowing that individual to hear what the other person has to say. And I must admit that of the clients that I've seen over the years, ego is present in a lot of men. It's a lot of men. So it's important for me to make that point, because the next point that I'm going to make here, we've talked about, engaging in conversations where you can check the temperature of the relationship. We talked about brushing up on communication skills, and we talked about managing daily stress. But number 4 is that you have to allow yourself to be open and vulnerable in a relationship. If you're not allowing yourself to be open and vulnerable, all right, and instead allowing your ego to kind of like take control and telling people that, that's not true. I don't know what you're talking about. You nagging me, all that kind of stuff. That is not what relationships are made of. They simply aren't. Being open and being vulnerable is not just something that women should be.
Right.
It is an attribute of everyone that's in the relationship. Whether you're a man, woman, it doesn't matter, right? Not allowing yourself to be vulnerable and open is also a quick exit to a relationship. Because when we think about emotional attachment, and I'm glad you brought up this point earlier, emotional attachment can occur as a result of sexual contact with somebody, but the most meaningful and deep attachment that you're going to have with people is going to come about as a result of you sharing with them aspects of yourself that you wouldn't readily share with everybody else. Your partner is going to develop a connection with you that is unique to anybody else in your life. And the only way that's going to happen is if you allow yourself to be open and vulnerable. And I'm sure that that's been a challenge when you think about some of your relationships.
Well, because I like, the more dominant males, open, vulnerable is not necessarily one of their strong points. But like I said, I've kind of been the one to leave a lot of relationships because whatever it wasn't changing. It's different with everybody. And I don't know if it was so much that sometimes they weren't listening or that they weren't vulnerable enough to make whatever change it was I was requesting. So, it's kind of like a balance. It's like, a guy might say, well, what I need for you to do is, okay, so one of my relationships, what he wanted was for me to not be as sexual as I am. That just wasn't gonna happen. So sometimes you can request of someone something that they just can't give, and then you just know that's not the person. So
yes, you're absolutely right about that. One of the things about being in a relationship, there comes a time where I think we all come to our senses. If we've been in relationships long enough, we come to our senses and we realize that you're not going to change anybody.
Right.
We have to accept how people are. you have to ask yourself the question, can you accept the way your partner is?
Right.
So, this is not about, bringing something up about your partner and saying you don't like that needs to change. No, this is about you coming to terms with if you can accept it or not.
And that's sort of just like what I was talking to Jeff about on the last segment. We were talking about the representative and women making better choices than men. Sometimes in the beginning, it's hard to make the right choice because the representative is there. So that person is being everything that they've heard you say, they want, or that they think you might want based on whatever. And then you get with them, and 3 to 5 months down the road, there's this other person that shows up, and you like, who the hell are you?
Yes.
Give me the other person back. But that other person wasn't who they can be for the rest of their life. They can only be that person for 3 to 5 months. And then that other person got to come in because that's who they really are. And then you have to decide if you can live with that. But, making that choice ahead of time, you couldn't do that based on the information you had at that point. And sometimes in 3 to 5 months, depending on how emotional a person is, they might be in love.
Yes. That's true.
That's
very true. It's very true. When it comes to dating, I just like to tell people to really slow down the process. And I like to tell people just kind of like give yourself about 6 to 12 months because of the reasons that you just gave. You're always going to get their representative at first. Everybody's going to put on their best clothes. Everybody's going to, make the best statements. Everybody's going to be as thoughtful that they can possibly be in the beginning. You need to give it 6 to 12 months so that people can really reveal who they are, and you can reveal who you are too. This idea that that we can connect without actually allowing ourselves to share the sides of us that we hide from other people. No, that's not relationships all about. Just isn't. And of course, we have kind of come up with this sort of like, mechanical way of doing relationships now, where you go out on a date. All right, you judge people based upon, where they take you on a date. You judge people based upon what they wear. You judge people based upon their conversation. You judge people based upon what kind of job they have. You judge people based upon the car they have. You're doing all this judging and not really showing people who we really are to see if there can be a connection between us. But all of our connections are based upon everything I just described, and those are not real connections.
Okay. So we have a question in the chat. And it says, is it possible to love someone and still not care, but care enough to know that you should care more? How do you teach yourself or get counseling to make yourself care more?
Good question. Good question. So let me ask you this, Xavier. I love to ask you questions. So how would you define love? If you had to choose one word that defined love, just one word, tell me what word that would be.
Action.
Yes. And for me, the word that comes to mind when it comes to love is commitment.
Okay.
Yep. So I like action too.
Yeah.
All right.
So action is going to include commitment.
Exactly.
When you love somebody, you are going to do something. And sometimes I think maybe some people think they're in love. It depends on what you grew up seeing as love, actually.
Yes.
Because my girl, she grew up in an abusive family. And so her version of love is just different.
Yeah, absolutely. So our versions of love, as you stated, is based upon our experiences and our background. But love in its purest form is an action word, and it's all about commitment. And yes, it is very possible. It's more than possible, all right, to be in love with someone, but still kind of don't act like you really care about them. And that goes back to everything that we're talking about right now. If the maintenance in the relationship is lacking, that you're going to feel less of the caring and concern that should be a part of the dynamic in the relationship. So you can love somebody and be like, well, I'm not going to be with anybody else, but the sort of like care and concern and passion that should periodically visit your relationship is not there. It's because the maintenance is not there.
And I think there's an emotional disconnection, which
Yes.
which can come from many things. Even if that person had like a very critical parent growing up, sometimes you will emotionally disconnect from people so that you don't get hurt. Even though you may have love for them, it gives you an inability to necessarily show it or really care because you're always protecting yourself. So that's an inside job, and you really have to find out where that emotional disconnection comes from so that you can fix that, and then the rest of it will fall in line.
And you see, I'm glad you're bringing up this particular topic, Xavier, because maybe next time we talk, we can talk about the individual stuff that people bring to relationships. Because when someone attempts to be in a relationship and they have not addressed their stuff, or they're not even aware that they got stuff going on, that just presents a whole new layer of difficulty in the relationship. We all have the personal responsibility. Even once you're in a relationship, you have the personal responsibility to continue to do some self-reflection and to work on the dysfunction that has become a part of your existence. Now, some people have more dysfunction than others, but I'm gonna tell you, there's been dysfunction in everybody's life, and it's up to you to figure out where it came from and how it's impacting your life right now.
Right. And some of us don't even really realize that we have these things going on. So I always reference myself because that's the only person I really know. And so when I went for my certification to become a life coach, because I was actually trained, and the thing was, we had to go through the whole coaching process ourselves. And going through that process and going through stuff that happened in my childhood and how it's showing up now. I didn't know I had any problems. I thought I was all good in the hood, But when we went through there, and then, some of the stuff we talked about, I actually started crying and all that kind of stuff. I was like, oh, so I have some issues, and this is where they come from, and this is how they're showing up in my life now. And so then it becomes, okay, how do you deal with it to heal from it? And then that's where the real coaching and therapy and all of that kind of stuff comes in.
Yes, absolutely. So the thing that people need to bring to the table when they're entering into a relationship or they're starting to date somebody, you just need to assume that the person that you're going out with got some stuff. You just need to assume that. All right. And anybody that's saying, oh, I don't need to go see a therapist, or I don't have nothing going on, those are huge red flags.
Or they think they healed themselves. They think they've healed themselves.
Exactly. Those are huge red flags. Anybody talking that kind of language and very consistent with it, it's going to lead to you all having difficulty communicating. And we already talked about communication here already. If there ain't no effective communication going on, you ain't got no relationship. So, it must start from within and your ability to manage what's going on with you. And to your point, you have to have some insight into it, because many of us are not aware, just simply not aware. So, so to answer that caller's question, absolutely. And what you have to do in order to increase the care and concern and the passion that's in the relationship, you have to practice maintenance. You have to check in, be very concerned about your partner, and your partner has to do the same with you. It's the maintenance that keeps the love alive in relationships. And love also is there.
I think in connection with what you just said, I always send my people that I'm coaching on relationships to that love language test, because that and I advise them to take it together, because that tells you a lot about how people receive love. Because we try and love everybody the way we want to be loved, but everybody receives love differently. So you got to know how your person is going to receive it. Like words of affirmation mean absolutely nothing to me. You could talk all day, tell me how great I am and all of that stuff, but go get my car and take it to the gas station and fill it up and then bring it back full. And then I'm like, oh, you love me. Okay.
Oh, they're gonna have a good time that night, boy.
Whereas the next woman, she might be like, oh, he told me I was so beautiful and he was gonna do everything in the world to please me. I'd be sitting there like, okay, let me, because love is action to me.
Yes.
And so my love language is acts of service. If you're not doing anything, you're not doing nothing. You ain't doing nothing.
Right. Makes sense. Makes sense what you're saying. Absolutely. So number 5, the last one I have on the list today, is one that we've talked about in here. All right. But it is important. You have to create time and space for regular intimacy. So again, we got these busy lives that include so much. And then somehow, for most of us, intimacy comes at the end of the night where we are exhausted and we wind up going to sleep. Right? You have to create time and space for regular intimacy. And not only sexual intimacy, we're talking like being able to look at one another's eyes for extended period of time. You ever looked at anybody, Xavier, and they looking at you and you feeling like they inside of you?
Yes, I've had that. That is just like the greatest thing ever. Those early morning talks, we're both laying there on the pillow looking at each other, and just it's not sexual. You could be talking about business, but you just have that spiritual connection where it's like, you just, that's good stuff.
Yeah. So, it does occur at some of the times that we just don't expect it sometimes. As long as you're open to it, it can happen at any time during the course of the day.
Yes.
Anytime. In the morning, it could happen, during the day when you're checking in on somebody. It could happen during lunch. It could happen while you are preparing dinner. Yeah, it could happen at the end of the night too. It can happen, but you got to be open and you got to create space for it. Creating space don't mean like, okay, at 5 o'clock, we're going to like get together and sit down and talk. It could mean that, but creating space means for me that you're always open to it. You're always like, in a space where you want to share who you are with the person that you're with, and you're open to receiving what they have to say to you. We have to create these spaces on a regular basis. And if we want to talk about sex more specifically, all right, yes, you got to create space for sex too, because sex is a very spiritual experience too.
Yep.
And if you want the kind of intimacy that we're talking about that will put you in a position where you want to guard your relationship, you got to create space for it. All right. And when you create space for it, you're going to get to know your partner in ways that nobody else has ever had. And as a result, you will want to guard that intimacy. And guarding that intimacy will cause you to say no when someone else comes along and decides that they want to offer you something sexual. Because what you have with your partner is so unique that you don't want nobody else to have that. And you don't want to break up what you have with your partner.
I always say, you talking about making space for it. And I always say, listen, we got to meet in the bed at least twice a day. First thing in the morning and last thing at night. We already got all the tools we need. So, so that's 2 good times to start the day off and end the day. That's the best way to start the day and end the day.
Yeah, it is. It certainly is. And then those are the practical things that we can determine like on a daily basis. But then there are these moments where we got to get away, all right, and create intimacy for one another. Like if the kids are around, or you got things going on with your family, you take some time off of work, you got to go away and reconnect. So, that could come in the form of a hotel stay. That can come in the form of going out of town. It can come in so many other forms, but these things must be regularly practiced.
That
Not
sounds
just
like fun.
yeah, it is. Absolutely. So, when we insert these practices into our life, everything that I just mentioned from 1 to 5, if if we insert these practices into our life, you will find that when it gets to the point when someone is actually, considering in their thoughts that they could possibly be with someone else, if you're practicing all these things, you can have a conversation about it. All right. Which will really avoid the trauma and the tragedy that could take place as a result of being in that situation. Communication, I cannot say enough. If you are talking with your partner, if you are observing your partner, if you are connected with your partner, you will be able to pick up on all kinds of things. And you'll be able to sit down with them and say, hey, something ain't right. I don't know what it is, but something ain't right. So let's talk. And if you got the kind of relationship with your partner where you all can actually, really feel comfortable and feel safe when you're talking to one another, even the most difficult conversations you can have, they're going to feel uncomfortable while you're having them, but you can still have them because it's a safe space for you.
Okay. All right. Well, this was a great conversation. And I was listening. This was effective communication.
Xavier, you always listen.
Yes, I do. I chose everybody. I handpicked everybody because I love the conversations you guys bring to the table. So I'm absolutely always listening and participating. So this was a great show. And do you have any final words for the listeners? Because we are already at the end. That hour went fast, huh? That's why you want 90 minutes.
Yeah, it did go pretty fast. The only thoughts I have to share with people when it comes to their relationships is that we have to really take a look at our tendency to be sort of trigger happy when it comes to this. Our tendency to want to end things, our tendency to give up on things without really doing the homework to try to figure out how you got to this space. Again, like I said earlier, we're not talking about, the relationship that from the beginning, y'all was cheating on one another. That wasn't no relationship. Y'all was just in a situationship or something like that. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about real, authentic relationships where people have used the word love and they practice it. If your relationship is really good and all of a sudden something happens, you need to go back and do an autopsy and try to figure out what happened, what led up to that.
You said autopsy.
That's right.
What killed it?
Exactly. You got to go back and do the science on it and try to figure out, okay, how did we get to this space here? And and it's going to be painful. It's going to be hurtful because you're going to hear some things that you don't like about yourself, and especially if you're the one that's been cheated on. If you're the one that's been cheated on, and the only thing that's in your head is that, oh, he cheated on me. He cheated on me. No matter what he said, is he cheated on me. But in a lot of cases, it gets to a point where you got to talk about how you contributed to the relationship and created an atmosphere where the disconnect took place and eventually people start drifting off. So you got to be open to reflecting, looking back, talking about the things that happened, the things that were unresolved, the conversations that y'all just let go and never found any solution or resolution to. You got to go back because that stuff ain't going away. You got to deal with it. So my thoughts is that people, take a look at your relationships before you end them, dissect them, try to figure out what went wrong, and if you need to, see a therapist. Therapists can help you out a whole lot with stuff like that. That's what we specialize in.
Yes, they can. And If you're not to that point, you can also do a life coach, because
Yep.
many of us are certified and trained to help people heal. So
Yes.
you just have to find what's the best fit for you. Now,
Yep.
I'm not promoting anything because I don't actually do one-on-one coaching anymore. So, all right. Well, thank you for the show. This was great. And everybody really liked your autopsy reference. That was pretty good. She said that was powerful. That relationship is dead. You got to do the science on it and figure out what killed this. Oh my goodness.
Yep.
All right. Well, so when is your next show?
My next show, according to you, is going to be, hold on a second here. I have to look at my little calendar here.
You know,
Moving along.
I don't know why y'all don't already have that information. You know, I'm gonna ask you.
You always do.
Yes. Yep. Every month, I'm gonna ask everybody, when is your next show? Because you should know when your show is.
That's true. It's every fourth Thursday.
Yep.
All right. So the fourth Thursday in January is going to be the 28th.
All right.
No, I mean the 27th. The
okay.
27th.
Yep, January 27th. So we will see you then. And I know you'll have another great topic for us.
And
so,
I will.
I have a question for the listeners now. I want to know who you know in Chicago that always knows what events are going on. I'm still looking for a Chicago correspondent to do the Thursday What's Hot segment. So if you know someone that always knows what's going on, please connect me with them. And if you are a promoter in Chicago and would like to Zoom in on Thursdays to promote your upcoming events or shows, please visit my Facebook page, Xavier Fox, to get Zoom information. Also, make sure you visit my YouTube channel, Xavier Fox Media, and click subscribe, please. That way you won't miss any of the upcoming podcasts. And we have a great podcast coming up later in January. We are doing a What Do Women Want in Men, and why are so many women choosing to be single? It's going to be a great podcast. I have some of your favorite Facebook personalities on there, social media personalities, I should say. You can also watch my talk shows and the podcast that you haven't seen. There's about 3 years of my internet talk show on there, as well as about 5 of the podcasts I've been doing over the past year. If you'd like to connect with me on social media, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn as Xavier Fox. That's X-A-V as in Victor, I-A, Xavier Fox. I know a lot of people call me Xavier. Xavier is a dude. I'm a girl. Xavier. Okay, Xavier Fox. My book, The Men in My Life and What I've Learned, is available on Amazon in Kindle format and paperback. And no, it is not a sex book. It chronicles the men that have played a major role in my life and what I learned from them. Starts with my dad. You can also purchase an autographed copy on my website, xavierfox.com. Be sure and visit my website for information on all the upcoming shows and events, as well as merchandise such as t-shirts and coffee mugs. Yep, I have those too. So I am signing out until the Monday morning talk, and I'm excited, y'all. So first, Gina Lamar Raw pops off at 7 a.m., and she's going to talk about redefining a woman, submission versus compromise. And then, then I get to interview one of my favorite local talents here in Chicago. Oh my goodness. And I hope I don't act like a fan, because I really am. Mr. Javon Watson of the Javon Watson Experience will be hanging out with me. And y'all gonna have to send me some calming energy, because I'm gonna be excited about it. And if that wasn't enough, we're gonna wrap it up with Dreezy Claus, who he's gonna be in the house on Monday, and he is Chicago's official first Black Santa. Yep, he's gonna be in the house too. So until then, stay safe and be prosperous.